What is Australia, and more to the point, what is the Albanese Labor government going to do about a little problem called Paul Keating? The former Prime Minister often weighs into political issues, and now and then he makes a reasonable point, like he did recently on our high tax rates. But when it comes to foreign policy, Keating has increasingly become a shrill voice for the sort of anti-Washington and pro-Beijing line that's only applauded by the extreme left of politics and, of course, the communist power brokers in China. Which is why it's so problematic that at a pivotal time in Australia's relationship with China, as tensions start to ease and the Chinese Foreign Minister Wang visits Australia this week, well, there'll be all the normal meetings and an extra one tacked on, with Paul Keating in Sydney. This meeting is a stroke of genius by China, seeking out a former Prime Minister who agrees more with their worldview than Australia's. Yeah, Keating is a former Labor Prime Minister who has more in common with Xi Jinping on these issues than with Anthony Albanese. Keating issued a statement today hitting back at coverage of this meeting and the analysis that said it was jarring. Would the Australian newspapers so describe as jarring and extraordinary a similar invitation from the British Foreign Secretary to former Prime Minister Tony Abbott or Scott Morrison? Of course not, said Keating. Of course not indeed. That's the point. Former Prime Ministers normally run traditional and well-established lines on foreign policy, lines that are in the main bipartisan and which therefore will not cut across our national interest. Keating's meeting, on the other hand, will understandably weaken Australia's position. It'll highlight a fissure in the Labor Party over our China posture, and it will amplify China's viewpoint rather than Australia's. I mean, just have a look at what I was reporting on when it comes to this issue on this station a year ago, almost to the day. Yesterday, China was blasting Australia over the AUKUS deal, but tonight, in the Great Hall of the People, as he looks out over Tiananmen Square, Xi Jinping will be toasting a former Australian Prime Minister. Yes, they will be loving how Paul Keating, a former Labor Prime Minister no less, has attacked the Labor government, the AUKUS deal, the US and his own country in an astonishing rant. Keating blames the current strategic competition not on the Chinese military build-up or China's contravention of international law or its aggressive threats over Taiwan. No, Keating blames the current fraught situation on the US.
The Americans will never condone or accept a state as large as them, you know, and that's what China presents. China's mere presence. I mean, they would have preferred they remain in poverty, 20% of humanity forever.
Yeah, that's Paul Keating a year ago. Of course the Chinese Foreign Minister will want to meet with Paul Keating. And of course the government has to facilitate it, our government. China would probably love a meeting with Bob Carr as well, a former Foreign Minister, Labor too, of course, who has turned decidedly anti-US and pro-China in his retirement. Now, of course, meetings like these should occur. We're an open and free democracy. Anybody can meet anybody. But in the strategic challenge of our times, these meetings will serve China's interests rather than ours. And that's the problem that Keating has created for his party and his country. How do you reckon Penny Wang would go trying to set up a meeting with a dissenting political voice in Beijing? Well, it would have to happen in a prison for starters. If Paul Keating really had any regard at all for the Albanese Labor government and its carriage of foreign policy, he would have politely declined to have this meeting. You know, he could have been busy redesigning Banger or something.